Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the Major Motion podcast, where we talk about the biggest and the best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, film editor for theyoungfolks.com. And from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a news and entertainment writer at Collider. It's Will Ashton.
Hey, I didn't know if you were actually going to do a traditional opening or if you're going to do what you did last week. Where you had a kind of like informal, what up? How you doing, Will?
Hey, Will, what's up?
And you're like, oh, by the way, like 5 minutes later,
this is plan this. Will, you think that I plan this? Like, you think that I just start the show and I'm just here's my scheme? No. It's just sometimes I get taken over by whatever shenanigans you're up to over there.
I was bracing myself for some sort of comment or misdirect or something you were going to do that would be against formula, and then you just did a traditional opening. So I was like,
I'm surprised I keep you on your toes like that. Maybe that's a good thing. You know?
I guess so.
It's kind of like how we're keeping the listeners on their toes, because they probably thought.
Yeah, I was just about to say, you beat me to the punch.
Oh yeah, you can say it. It's fine. I relinquish.
No, you go ahead.
The joke. I was just gonna say, listeners are probably like clicking this episode and being like, oh, that must be a typo, or RRR. That must be some sort of reference to Harry Potter that I don't understand. So, because the boys, trademark, are going to be talking about Fantastic Beasts, Secrets of Dumblewhatever, and that's going to be the big show. It's the big movie that came out this weekend, isn't it? Are we talking about it? No?
Sure. I don't know why you keep saying Dumblewhatever as if like people don't know who Dumbledore is.
No, it's not that people don't know. It's just that I get sick of saying the name of the movie by the time I get. So it's just like, whatever.
I mean, yeah, if you were like Grindelwhatever, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense, because
that too.
Who remembers Grindelwald? But Dumbledore, I mean, that's OG Harry Potter. That's like going back, to the beginning.
I don't feel obligated to put respect into the name at this point.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
But yeah, that is the hippogriff in the room, I suppose, that we are not talking about the big Fantastic Beasts movie. I do want to point out, by the way, though, that movie, have you seen the box office for Fantastic Beasts Secrets of Dumbledore?
Dumbledore, yeah. I saw like some headlines about it. It did like okay by pandemic standards, but by Fantastic Beasts standards, it's doing, or by Harry Potter standards. I don't even know if there are standards for the Fantastic Beasts movies at this point. But I know by Harry Potter standards, it's a new low.
Yeah, what I'm seeing is it's doing fine worldwide. But domestically, it's not doing super well. Domestically, it shares like 22%. Now, we got to factor in, it's a big UK movie, right? And the international box office takes that into account.
Sure. I think it's not doing great in the UK, though, from what I've heard.
I don't know. I'd have to look that up. I assume that that's where a lot of it's coming from, because it's made 193.4 worldwide. That includes North America, UK, all the rest. And I think that like its Thursday tracking was basically, it was like pretty close to on par with Grimes. I'm going to go with Grimes.
Grimes.
Yeah. But yeah, because I think it's an interesting thing to bring up. And the only reason I do is because the Warner Brothers is really looking at like, are we going to keep doing this? And I mean, the consensus, I think overwhelmingly from critics like us is, please no, like no more of this Fantastic Beasts stuff. These movies, like I've been saying it since the first one. People are usually like, I like the first Fantastic Beasts. I never liked these movies. I like will go on record. I remember on Now Conspiring being the one, muggle, I guess, who was just like, come on, like this is not magical. This is not fun. Like I thought that movie was garbage, and Crimes of Grindelwald was worse. Yeah. But are they going to keep making these? Are they?
I don't know. I mean, well, I was okay with the first one. I remember being like, this is fine. I don't share your disdain for it, but I do remember when that movie came out. I'd seen, I think, before you, but we were just kind of informally getting to know each other. We were still like kind of on like casual term or like, formal terms with each other.
Yeah, we weren't ribbing each other yet. Yeah, right. We weren't comfortable,
Sure.
giving each other the business.
But, because of the time gap, I often you sometimes get some of your messages later. So, like, I think I'd gone to bed and I woke up and I got like 14 messages from you being like, using 4-letter words to describe that film. And I was like, oh, wow, it's weird to see like the Pixar theory guy just like yelling in my text feed about the Fantastic Beasts films. But I mean, I don't know. You were certainly
you knew you wanted to do Cinemaholics. You were like, this is the show.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. It's not a movie like I defend or anything. It's just kind of like, yeah, I thought the first one was fine. The second one basically killed any interest I had in the Fantastic Beasts films, along with all the stuff with J.K. Rowling, and it's just kind of getting tired at this point. And I think the core idea of Fantastic Beasts is fine. Like if it was just following a dude kind of like Pokemon snapping his way through the Harry Potter world with all these like fantastic beasts, I think it would actually be a pretty fun side series. But
this is coming from the Detective Pikachu fan, by the way.
Yeah, I like Detective Pikachu. Fine. Yeah. But you know what I mean though? Like I feel like if it was just like a side thing where it's like we're not dealing with Hogwarts, we're not dealing with magic really. We're just kind of focusing on the creatures and weird stuff that happens in this world outside of the literal magic. And I'd be cool with that.
Because they said early on, they were like, these aren't prequels to Harry Potter, right? And then they just totally switched course on that. They're like, actually, no, never mind. This is all about Dumbledore and Grindelwald.
Right.
And I personally, like, I don't care either way. I think either direction isn't very interesting, just to me personally. I think the whole idea of like the Fantastic Beast thing was always like a weird concept. I think the issue with me was always I never liked Newt Scamander as a character. Nothing to say about Eddie Redmayne, but it's just like he's just to me a very boring character. I don't think he has interesting dilemmas as a character. I don't think he has compelling conflict. Whatever he's up to, he just like is chasing around the Fantastic Beasts. I just think the way they try to shoehorn him into these like larger wizarding battle plots is like so weird, and it doesn't fit. And you can just, I think, tell that they like really ran their course like with the David Yates direction for these movies.
Sure.
And again, we didn't see Secrets of Dumble.
The subtitle, whatever.
We're just talking about the first two movies.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the thing that I think endeared me to the first film was not Eddie Redmayne's performance, which I thought was fine, but I agree he's not the most compelling protagonist. I think I was more charmed by Dan Fogler's character.
Yeah, him and Queenie, those were the characters they should have focused on. After that movie, they should have, because you even see in this third movie, like the Fantastic Beast part of the title has gotten smaller and smaller as these movies have gone on. And they should have just, switched to just which characters are actually working, right? And no, they didn't.
I just thought, I think his idea, like the idea of a Muggle being in the world of wizards and being in magic and having this sort of like fascination and appreciation for magic is the one thing that really stood out to me in the first film. And I feel like he was largely discarded in the second film, which is why I think that movie, among other reasons, doesn't really work.
Right.
And it seems like the trailers at least suggest that they're focusing more on him, but like you said, I haven't seen the film. I don't know. I've heard the third film doesn't really have a protagonist or a main character. I heard it's just kind of a hodgepodge.
I heard Dumbledore is. I heard he's like the main focus, but I mean, it is his name in it. I heard like Newt Scamander isn't in it much. That's great to hear for me at least. But yeah, by the way, sorry, it's been out for a couple of weeks and it like worldwide. So that is also a reason why the worldwide box office has been okay. Is this
more robust?
Yeah. It's that isn't like a single weekend. Like it did open a little bit earlier in other markets. Just wanted to get that out of the way.
Sure. I mean, even though the first Harry Potter film follows a sort of basic hero's journey archetype, it still has, a pretty clear main character. It's Harry Potter and the blankety blank blank blank. And the Fantastic Beasts are just kind of like, at this point, the Fantastic Beasts aren't really in the movies at this point. I don't think so, at least. I mean,
I think the cricket probably still is. The cricket's fun.
Yeah, but that's a Fantastic Beast, not plural. There's like crabs or something in this one from the trailer, but it's like, that's not like fantastic. That's just a crab. Like, I could see that, the Ding Dang Beach.
I think one thing I've been kind of anticipating is that obviously there's a lot of like online cultural backlash to J.K. Rowling, because of how, she's been very like transphobic and people want to cancel her for sure. The last few years, she's just been a bit of like a lightning rod of controversy, but I've always taken it as like that's very online. I very much doubt it has like a massive impact on how successful Harry Potter stuff is going to be. Like, yeah, sure, you have a lot of people bleeding off the fan base, whatever, but I mean, I don't know, that probably was going to happen anyway. And also, we're saying here, it's like people don't pay attention to that stuff. Like most people, your average person on the street's not going to know. Like, they might not even recognize J.K. Rowling's name. It's like, oh yeah, it sounds familiar. No, they see Harry Potter on a poster. They see Fantastic Beasts. They're like, yeah, Dumbledore. I like that.
I mean, they might be more familiar with that than other online dramas that have happened, but
maybe in passing. But yeah, maybe not enough to drive them to like leave Harry Potter forever, right?
Sure. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that like Harry Potter, I guess, just kind of ran its course. Like I get Warner Brothers really wanted to keep that cash train flowing, but it just didn't really seem like they like without having actually Harry Potter and Hermione and Ron and, you know, the characters that people grew up with literally and loved. It just doesn't seem like people really care all that much or really have any investment in this side franchise other than like, let's just get reconnected with Hogwarts. But yeah, I mean, when you suggested you didn't want to review it, I didn't put up much of a fight because I just don't really have any interest in this movie. And
what are we going to say? You know, it's like, it's one of those situations where I don't want to watch it. I don't like this franchise. I don't think like people are going to know what I'm going to say. There's no way it's going to turn me around. Well, and yeah.
I mean, when you suggested that, that's why I was saying like, if we aren't going to do Fantastic Beasts, which is undeniably the big film of the weekend, like we might as well use our platform to promote a film that at the time, at least I was really championing you hadn't seen yet. And I was just like, well, if there's ever going to be an opportunity to review a film like RRR, it's this weekend. So I think we made the better call. I'm looking forward to our discussion with it. But yeah, I mean, that was just my thinking, at least going into this.
Yeah, I still think that the reason I wanted to talk about this at all is I do think it is pretty interesting to track and chart, like how much do these like sort of like online controversies impact box office. I think a lot of people probably were like anticipating a huge reckoning, you know, they wanted to see this movie crater. And I was never that optimistic as somebody who, you know, is just kind of like, yeah, I think there would be some schadenfreude in like the Harry Potter universe getting a kick in the leg for stuff that's gone on. But I mean, being realistic, like I think that it was always going to be diminishing returns because the reviews were bad on the last one. Like we know how this stuff works. I looked it up too. I was like, Crimes of Grindelwald had like a $62 million debut. And yeah, this debuted to way less than that, right? So yeah, I do think that we can sort of anticipate that like they might make another one because apparently they're still tossing around the idea of doing a fourth and a fifth and they're waiting to see how this does. And I could easily see them add like pandemic math excuses to this, which we've seen a lot. You know, people are like, well, it didn't do, we're in a pandemic. That's why it didn't make money. Don't pay attention to these 12 other movies that made a ton of money, you know, during the pandemic. It's sure. Yeah. I think that everybody's kind of like playing with a broken calculator when it comes to this stuff. So I would not be surprised if they're like, okay, fine, we'll do one more. And then, you know, maybe one more after that.
I mean, if they do go ahead with another film or two more films, I think that would show that Warner Brothers is maybe even more desperate for franchises and IP properties than I initially anticipated. From what I have heard, and this is all kind of going into speculation and stuff, so I don't know if it's confirmed at this point, but I do know that they did some pretty extensive reshoots for this film, and that apparently the end of it is pretty conclusive. I don't know exactly what happens, but I've heard it's pretty, like, it could be the finale of this trilogy now, if it is a trilogy at this point. Like, it seems like Warner Brothers is pretty open to just kind of wiping their hands of this and moving on to like...
I wouldn't blame them. I think what my advice, and we can move on after this, my advice for Warner Brothers with Harry Potter, either don't do it or just don't get rid of this team that you have. Like, remember when Harry Potter used to have like different directors and different writers, and like they still have J.K. Rowling, they still have David Yates working on these movies. Like, get somebody new in there. Like, honestly, and I get it. Like, Rowling, you know, she's the creator, right? So like, it's hard for them to do that, but she's not a screenwriter. Like, she just isn't. And she's also like, you know, she seems to be much more focused on, you know, trying to like be transphobic all the time. So like, let her go do that. And then if you really need to do Harry Potter things, just get some fresh talent in there, get a fresher perspective. I think that would be the spark this thing needs. And wait a while, because we've had too much of this over the last 20 years.
I mean, that's where it kind of, I wonder how much of it is just like J.K. Rowling's ego or pride, because I really do wonder about that. Like you mentioned, like, why does she feel so compelled to write these movies to be involved. Like she has more money than God at this point. Like it's not like she really needs to like, prove herself at this point. And I guess it's just keep retaining that control or whatever. Because like I always feel
there's like a nice way to look at it. Like you feel a kinship with the characters in this universe. Like I can totally understand wanting to, just from a creative level, still have involvement because it's your thing. It's like George Lucas held on to Star Wars for so long, right?
Yeah.
Like I would never bemoan like a creator, like somebody like that for being like, this is still my creation, the thing I made. Like, I get that, but at the same time, it's like,
yeah.
What else do you have to say with these characters, honestly?
Well, I mean, with Lucas, at least, like, you can say what you will about the prequels, but I still think Lucas deeply cares about that franchise. Really, like, I think he made the films that he wanted to make, maybe not as well as he wanted to, but I think he told the story he wanted to tell in some fashion or another.
Yeah.
And I just don't really get the sense from Rowling with these movies that she's, like, really, like, she has ideas she wants to explore. There are things she wants to say in this franchise. It just feels like she's continuing it because she feels some sort of obligation to do so, and I'm not really sure exactly what that obligation is at this point.
Well, I feel obligated to talk about something else.
All right.
Because I think that basically covers it. Real quick, I wanted to say there was another movie that came out this week, Father Stu, the Mark Wahlberg film that also stars Jackie Weaver, Mel Gibson, and a few other familiar faces. And this is like a, kind of a sneakily faith-based film. Like it's not like God's Not Dead, right? It's not like a Pure Flix kind of movie where you're like, okay, yeah, this was funded by a bunch of youth pastors. No, it's or I guess mega church pastors would be more fitting. But no, it's like based on a true story of like a Catholic priest, basically. And I didn't watch the trailer for this, so I didn't know going in how all over the place it would be. But basically, it's Mark Wahlberg playing like three totally different characters. This kind of guy who's like a boxer for like the first 20 minutes. And then he's like, he goes to Hollywood, tries to make it big, baby. And then he like falls in love and then finds God. And then he has a disease and he's a pastor or a priest. And I'm just like, whew, it's a slog of a movie. I think it's pretty bad. I think the best thing about it is Jackie Weaver, because like she has like a few lines of dialogue where she was saying exactly what I was feeling and thinking. Otherwise, I thought it was like definitely not worth checking out. And also, I really hate that Mel Gibson is such a horrible person in real life. It's just hard for me to see him in a movie and just be like, man, I don't. Why are you still here? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just not a fan. Like, just his face irks me. What are you gonna do? But
sure.
Yeah, not a good movie. Adonis Gonzalez reviewed it for us on the Young Folks, and he like had some like deep, like, I don't understand how religion works. Someone please explain this to me energy, which I thought was pretty fascinating. Because I was certainly like, I'm not Catholic, so I didn't have like a Catholic way into this. Lash, and I assume that you'll be checking this out at Mass. Public
I don't
screening?
know. I mean, my dad, he's a Catholic, a pretty devout Catholic, but he also is really into wizards and magic. So he was interested in seeing Fantastic Beast. I don't know if I'm going to be seeing with him, but I might offer Father Stu as a substitute, because I'm more curious about I'm more curious about Father Stu than I am about Fantastic Beast at this point.
It's a long sit. I'm going to say that. It's not
really
long runtime wise, but I mean, it is long runtime wise, but it feels longer, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, I should note that from what I can tell, it is based on a true story, right? Stuart Long was a real guy. I mean, just to be clear, that it's not like based on three different people or fictional. It is based on a true life story. I don't know how much of that is accurate or anything. I'm not too familiar with the real Stuart Long story, but I don't know. I mean, it is worth also noting that the filmmaker Rosalind Ross, I believe is her name, it's Mel Gibson's partner. And I'm not quite sure if Mel Gibson had a hand at all in the making of the film outside of his part, or if he just kind of did that, Yeah,
and he's not in the movie a ton. Like, he is a supporting character, but he's kind of like if you added all his time up, it's probably 15 to 20 minutes total. Maybe. Yeah.
But I mean, I was reading something earlier that was kind of fascinating about like how all of his directorial efforts are about like men who sort of have to kind of maintain some sort of dignity when facing, persecution or punishment or something like that. And Hacksaw Ridge was like more of like an internal thing, like that internal battle to find that moral strife or that moral like obligation. And I heard this movie is kind of similar, but it doesn't result to violence. And I think that's if Gibson had any sort of involvement with the filmmaking of it, which I don't actually know if that's true or not, but I at least in that respect, I find it to be kind of interesting. But I imagine, as you're suggesting, that's mostly sort of a mockish film that, relies on Mark Wahlberg kind of maybe overdoing it to continue to push himself as a sort of faith-based actor.
That, I think, is the case. But, what are you going to do? I think that it's out there. It's not oppressively bad. I'm sure some people, including Will Ashton's father, might watch it and get something out of it. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea if we'll watch it.
It's not unwatchable. It's not like you're watching it and you're like, this is terrible acting. This is terrible writing. It's just like the whole thing put together. It's like once you like piece it together as a whole, it's like, man, what was this experience? Like, none of this felt worth what we were just doing. So that's how I came out of it. We're All Going to the World's Fair also came out, I think, in limited theaters this past week, and I think it's opening wide next week. And this is a huge movie, a huge, I'm going to say milestone. The film was directed by Jane Schonbrun, a trans and non-binary director and writer. And this premiered at Sundance last year, like 2021 Sundance. So it's been a long time now. And it's kind of cool. It's like a horror film from a trans filmmaker and a non-binary filmmaker. And it was one of those movies I remember when it came out. Like, I wasn't the biggest fan of We're All Going to the World's Fair, which is like kind of like this eerie sort of like you're watching this like teenager, just kind of like in her bedroom on the internet, just slowly descending into madness, essentially, is the plot. And it's pretty haunting of a movie for sure. Like it definitely like it has Slender Man vibes to an extent. What do you think of it?
Yes, no, this is a film since I've seen it. And actually, I think I saw it before it premiered at Sundance because I got a screener for it, that I've been trying to champion a good bit because it does have that quality that you're suggesting, which is that on its surface, I think it works as a film. Like, I think it's effective at what it tries to do, but I think the power of it really sort of lingers the more you think about it and the more you really feel its connection to what the internet age is and how like there is this sort of gap between the known and the unknown in a way where it's like we are like a knowledge-based age where like we have access to all this information, but there is also just so much that inherently through like chat rooms and anonymous interactions with people online that there is this sort of sense of not really knowing who you're talking to or not really knowing all the time like who you're actually engaging with. And I think this movie really feels attuned to that in a way that doesn't feel opportunistic in a way that other internet movies have. Like, it feels like it actually is from a filmmaker who grew up in the internet age and has like that real connection to it and knows how isolating but also how vital it can be for, sort of insulated people who can't really fully express themselves publicly for any number of reasons. And I think it's a really outstanding film that has grown on me the more I really reflect on it. And I've been, making conscious efforts to really push it. And that's why I wanted to talk about on the show. I also was fortunate enough to get it to play for one night at the theater where I worked back in January, and we had a really nice response to it.
Scary, right?
Yes, January Scary, our annual, or now I guess annual.
I imagine because this movie's box office so far is only 13,000, and I imagine a lot of that came from your theater.
Well, we this would have been before it premiered.
But doesn't that count as box office?
I really don't know. It wouldn't be 13,000, but
I know that.
But no, I mean, I just really hope people check this out. I mean, the way I've been kind of casually describing the film is that it's sort of like 8th grade by way of Paranormal Activity, but I don't want to make it seem like it's like super jump scare heavy or
right. It's not Unfriended. It's a Screen Life movie, right? But it's more about like the scariness behind the rabbit holes of the dark side of the internet, which is a different kind of scary.
Right. Yeah. And I just want to make sure that like people don't have the wrong perception of the film when they go into it. But I really do think if you give it a chance, it'll prove to be really effective. And I think the lead performance, I forget the actor's name, but I think
Anna
she
Cobb.
really.
I think it might be a debut performance, I think.
Yeah, it's a tremendous lead performance. And I'm very curious to see where that performer goes next as well. So,
agreed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry you didn't enjoy it more or get more out of it. But I just feel it's a movie that's really worth seeking out, and people should at least give it a shot if they can.
I hold it up as like a neat movie, like an oddity that I really respect and I'm glad exists, because it's talking about something that I think more movies should be about. I wasn't able to really connect with it deeply, but I guess, and which is weird too, because like I certainly was feeling the unsettling mood of the movie. Like I think that whole concept of, what are kids doing, this generation, in their bedrooms, and like, especially in light of like right now, like there's such a like increased hyper fixation on what kids are being taught in the classroom. It's like, oh, you can't indoctrinate my kids. Parents are so freaking out about what kids are getting in school in terms of like information, but like, holy crap, your kids are in like their bedrooms at night, like who knows what they're consuming from the internet, and like parents could not be less than bothered about that sort of thing, and I think this movie certainly tackles like how that can be like almost like this weird sort of like rite of passage for somebody of like when they're at that age when they first consume like a breadth of like really disturbing content, and how it like can or can't change them. And I think in that respect the movie's pretty effective actually. But yeah, I gotta say it's like definitely not one that I was singing the praises of as fiercely, but I certainly like I'm really impressed by this filmmaker and this lead performance. So, and it's in limited release. I think it's like in some coastal theaters, and I don't think it's in San Francisco yet, but it probably will be by next week. So yeah, depending on your area, it might be showing up. I think, Will, you say it's not showing up yet in Pittsburgh near you, but we'll see if that changes.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm really not sure how big of a theatrical rollout it's going to get. And I was curious to see it in theaters because I'm really not sure if it works better on the big screen, if it actually works better at home. Because like you said, you and we saw it at home, I saw it on my computer, which I feel like is a pretty appropriate way to watch the film. But I don't know if that, like the disquieting feel of it, I don't know if it's more effective in a theater or if that might take away from some of its power if you just see it at home and like you watch it the same way that the characters are sort of experiencing the media that they see. I don't know if that would add a level to it in a way, but obviously I mean above all else I want people to support the film, so certainly if you have the chance to see in theaters I would encourage you to do so. But if you don't have the opportunity to see in theaters, I think seeing it at home might prove to be an even richer experience in some ways. Cool.
Well, I had just one more movie to bring up before the main event. And this is a big one, too, because it just opened. And I don't know if it's technically a wide release, but it's playing in a few theaters around the Bay Area. Yeah. Not all of them, right? I mean, I looked and I saw that it's not like, I think in my area it's not around. I'd have to drive a bit, but it's playing. And it's Duel, the new film from Riley Stearns. So Riley Stearns did that Art of Self-Defense movie. And with this movie, which stars Karen Gillan, this movie is kind of funny too because it premiered at Sundance, and we've already kind of mentioned it before, and it's kind of getting a quick turnaround here. I think because I think they have faith in this to kind of find its a springtime audience as like an alternative movie. It's like a sci-fi thriller, and I think we were both pretty favorable for it at Sundance. I don't think it was either of our favorites, but I certainly like it was one of the most memorable movies I saw. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I just rewatched the film the other day, actually yesterday, because it holds up? It mostly holds up. Yeah, I think I preferred it the first time because the humor is a little more cutting, and like if you don't know what's going to happen, I think it's a little bit more effective and a little bit more engaging. But I do think watching a second time, I really appreciate how tight the screenplay was and how much Riley Stearns put so much thought into concentrating. It's shot in like Finland, but it doesn't really take place in Finland. It doesn't really, I don't know if they ever really disclose where it takes place, but it has that sort of European feel, but it also feels very American. It kind of adds that sort of like, weird, I think sense of, I think Stearns always wanted to do it in a different country too, because I think they originally were going to do it in New Zealand or Canada. So I think he was purposely looking for that sort of like, this is our world, but not quite our world, referring specifically to the United States. Mm-hmm. I think that was all part of his plan, I want to say.
Yeah, and I also really appreciate, like, I noticed this time more that, like, some characters have, like, your kind of basic traditional American accents, and some have different European accents, and that kind of adds to, like, it never being quite central to one place in time, and that, you know, and this movie got a lot of, this movie got a lot of comparisons to Yorgos Lanthimos, same as his previous film, The Art of Self-Defense. And I can see why, and I feel like people use it as a sort of dismissive of his work, like it's trying to replicate. Which I mean, I don't think it's. I mean, I would say that Art of Self-Defense and Duel are as good as Yorgos Lanthimos' best films, but I do think he seems to like the way that people sort of have a disaffected tone, and the way that they like don't really react much to violence in a very violent world. I think that kind of makes it more stark and often more funny in a very sort of dry and dark way. You're right.
Yeah. It's like the dry reactions to things that you would expect, like huge emotional reactions to. That's very like, that's a very specific cinematic approach.
Yeah, and I also appreciated that, especially on rewatch, that when people do react to things, it becomes more pronounced, and it means more, because that's like, you know, like people are actually really responding, and that makes some of the emotional beats, I think, really affect you more in the long run. Yeah.
I think it's quite a good movie. Yeah, you know, I'm kind of at that point in the year where I'm looking at, all right, so what are some of my favorite movies of the year so far? I'm kind of like putting everything into the list, and yeah, you know, Duel's not at the very top, but it's certainly up there in terms of like, hey, like you might not have heard of this movie. It's a really good Karen Gillan performance. It's a really fun concept. Aaron Paul has a fun little turn in it. And it's got an interesting message, you know. It's I saw one reviewer kind of liken to it as like, hey, there's a Clone Wars movie coming out, you know. And I think it's coming out at an interesting time too, because it does have sort of this like, hey, it's like almost like Hunger Games for adults a little bit, of like, if you grew up on the Hunger Games movies and if you always felt like, man, that those movies like have such a dark premise, but like such a fluffy like story attached to it. Duel is like a much more grounded sort of like, what if you had a clone, you know, this person who looked like you and had to compete in the world to be in the same world as you. What would you do in order to like, you know, basically defeat them in hand-to-hand combat if you have like a year to prepare. And it's just such a like weird premise, but it has like all these implications that I think get spoken more of like what's not said than what is said. Like I think you were even messaging me like some stuff that you picked up on the second watch that you hadn't really noticed before, that maybe even speak further to like how this movie has a lot of like deeper, richer themes than maybe we notice at first glance. I mean, I'm adding the deeper, richer themes part. You didn't say that, but that was my takeaway.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, both times I watched the film, I appreciate it as basically sort of an allegory for depression and how people can often find themselves at a point where like life is seemingly meaningless and sort of absurd, and there's not really a lot of sense to the noise. And certainly in this film's case, like there's a sense that like people expect Sarah to be this type of person, and there is someone who can be that for other people, but and there's a sense of like, oh, why does she feel the need to keep going? Why does she feel a need to fight for her life? But it's just like, well, my life is my own. It's like I don't really have much in this world, but I have my life, and I kind of just need to fight for it because of that. And it becomes a sort of odd and, you know, like we said, darkly funny take. And, you know, I think some people, I don't know, I guess they're maybe sort of expecting something more drastic to happen at the end of the film, like maybe something that's a little bit more action focused, and that I think adding to some people's disappointment in the film.
They're like, hey, I'm gonna double feature this with The Last Duel. I wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, weirdly, I would say this is a kind of fun double feature with Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like if you need something like a cleanse it, like a palate
to bring yourself down, you know,
right,
just like, okay, right, now exactly. We need to, let's bring it all back down a little bit. I like that.
Yeah, you know, but I don't know. I mean, I actually think it's a type of film though that it's something I found the second time is that gets, I think, better as it goes along. Like the beginning is solid, but I think the end of it, or like the last act of it, is really where this movie comes to life. And I guess that's where I sort of diverge from other people's opinions, like where the end kind of made them lose interest or wane in appreciation for the film. The end is what I think really makes it pronounced and affecting. So yeah, I just think it's a good dark comedy, and I hope people check it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a quick watch. It's about an hour and a half, and we'll see how it does. I mean, I don't see it being like a huge success, but it's a low budget film, and it's another great showcase for Karen Gillan, who I'm always happy to see her sort of like stretching beyond,
Sure.
her sort of like Marvel roles, and I think like that. What was it? The Jumanji stuff. Like she's fine in those movies and everything. Like I have nothing against Nebula or what she's doing in Jumanji or whatever. But I don't know. I just think this mode is such an interesting thing for her. I know Party's Just Beginning wasn't everybody's like favorite. That was what her directorial debut, right?
Party's Just Beginning.
Yeah. But I think like that mode for this actor is always like really fun to see. So I'm excited that she has another successful kind of indie feature like this under her belt. And really cool to see Aaron Paul, just on the big screen. I think that we don't see him enough. I think like since Need for Speed, it just seems like the guy has been kind of like relegated to, TV shows and like bit characters. And I think that's a huge shame. He's really talented. Even in this movie, he's not like a big like character or anything, but certainly one of the features of the film, I think. So
yeah. The last thing I just want to say about Karen Gillan's performance is that something that I really appreciated is that she has to really differentiate between the two Sarahs while kind of keeping level with the film's sort of muted tone and, like I said, that sort of disaffected way of talking. But she's really good at like differentiating between the two Sarahs, where to the point where you're never really confused which one is which, unless the film needs you to be confused. And I just like making those two characters really distinct and different from one another while still inherently kind of being the same person and keeping true to the film's sort of, like I said, muted tone. And that's just a really tough balancing act that I think she pulls off really well. So that's just something I wanted to highlight as well about her performance.
All right, we've talked about some indie movies. We've talked about, one of the most micro budget movies of the year, The Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Grindelwald. But now we're going to talk about a movie that is completely different from everything we've just been discussing. A total sort of like bit of a surprise film, I think, for me at least. I don't know about it for you, because I know you were aware of it earlier, but like I don't think either of us went into 2022 expecting this movie, right?
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, not only a total departure from what we're used to seeing, a complete departure from anything we've talked about ever on the history of the show.
I think that is extremely fair to say, because what one genre of film that Will and I haven't delved into on this show, regrettably, is the genre, or I don't know if you can call it a genre, but essentially Bollywood films. Bollywood, Tollywood, the Indian and Pakistani filmmaking in that part of the world, which is a huge film industry. I mean, it's massive. We certainly talked about that sort of type of film before on the show, specifically when American films have taken, maybe some elements from it, like in very, very slight passing, right? Like people kind of noted that the live action Aladdin was trying to like market itself as having like a Bollywood dance sequence, or at least have some like very, very light Bollywood inspiration to sort of attract a global audience. And say what you will, that might be the key to why that film was such a massive success internationally, is because people were like, hey, that's different. I don't usually see that from Disney, and overseas Bollywood is a much, much bigger deal. But with this film, RRR, this is definitely one of the biggest like word of mouth sort of like, it came to the US, it was super successful in other territories, and it came here and people were like, hey, you know what? This is something that like Americans need to sort of like check out, right? I think there can be a little bit of like some I don't want to say dismissiveness, but a little bit of like, at least in my area, we have lots of international films come here, which is really cool. And one surge of interest in international films we've seen most recently over the last few years are Chinese films. Things like The Wandering Earth, for example. They can be huge events in my area. Like lots of people from here are like, they work in like the Silicon Valley, like San Francisco area, and they have like work visas and stuff, and they love those movies back home. They come here and they spread the word, and people are like, oh yeah, this is like really cool. Why didn't I know about it? And it's because, like they're not really marketed to, because there's not this expectation of like, oh, I'm going to enjoy this film with subtitles. And I think one film, I know I'm doing like a weird preamble here, but I think that one film that kind of helped pave the way, I think, for like mass audiences in North America to give subtitled films a bigger chance was Parasite winning Best Picture. That was such a big, sort of change. And then also I think Netflix has been instrumental in sort of introducing and like getting like audiences to sort of get more and more used to like, you can watch a subtitled movie. Like, it's not going to break your brain. It doesn't need to be dubbed. Like, and I get it, Netflix has dubbed things all the time, but I think it's like a gateway sort of thing. I think people sometimes watch dubbed stuff on Netflix and they're like, this dub isn't perfect, I'm just going to watch it in the original. That adds more to the cultural atmosphere anyway. And I've seen time and again, like people like a few years ago who would never in a million years watch a subtitled movie are being like, oh yeah, I watched, this movie, like I watched this Korean, K-pop thing on Netflix the other day. It was awesome. And it's becoming more and more mainstream. I say that to somebody like, I grew up on subtitled movies because in Puerto Rico, like movies were always subtitled because like if people spoke Spanish. And so like a lot of movies had to be either subtitled in Spanish or English because you had a lot of different, Spanish and English speakers. So yeah. You gonna say something?
Well, yeah, I mean, because that ties into that quote from Bong Joon-ho. I think it was during his acceptance speech at the Golden Globes where he said, if I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't know if I know exactly, but he said, if you can get past the 1-inch barrier on the screen, you have a whole world of cinema that you can experience. Yeah. And that's just what it is. Like, like, I don't know, for some reason, I guess people just kind of get scared by subtitles. Like, I feel like there's this perception, I guess, where people thought like, oh, it's going to be like homework or something where I have to kind of like read to watch a film. Like I just want to like casually put something on. And, I mean, maybe you do have to kind of like do a little bit more work as far as like, like it might be in a country you're not as familiar with. And so like maybe some of the things related to politics or social customs or anything like that may not be, as natural or to you or something different from your experience. So you may have to kind of learn as you're watching it what is going on. But I've found at least that the more you really open your horizons and explore different films from different cultures and different countries and different languages, you really just broaden your horizon in so many vivid and extraordinary ways. And I mean, I don't think I've ever been lesser for seeking out a film, with that 1-inch barrier, you know what I mean? Like it's always, it's even if I don't love a film from another country, I at least usually get something that I wouldn't get out of a mediocre American film or something like that. So, I mean, it's not, I am certainly, someone who has had limited experience watching foreign language films in the past. I would imagine I've had more experience than some of the people you're referring to, but it is something I've made a conscious effort to really push forward and, really to allow myself to see films from other countries and broaden my horizons. And that was one big reason why I wanted to see this film for sure.
I think for me, I think there are a lot of people like me who grew up on closed captions because, my hearing was never good. And I was one of those weird kids. I loved reading, or knowing what words were being said because I was fascinated by words and I was fascinated by spelling. And like, I always had the closed captioning on. People would be like, can you turn that off? Like, we don't need subtitles. I'm like, I need subtitles. Thanks. And I remember like in movie theaters, like I think when I was first in California, like the mid 2010s, and I would purposely seek out international films because it was before I had hearing aids. And those were the films that I was like, oh, yes, it has subtitles. Like that to me was like such a relief. There are a lot of people like me who are like, we need hearing assisted devices. And if you don't have them, or if your theater doesn't have like good access to them, then subtitles like just, it makes it that for me as I'm able to enjoy the film a lot easier because I'm not like, what did they say? What was that word? Huh? Especially like fantasy movies too. And also like anime, like I remember some of my first experiences, like sort of getting over that like barrier was because if you only watch anime, especially like when we were growing up, most anime was dubbed that we had. But if you wanted to really get to the good stuff, or if you wanted to watch anime that was like much more like recent, you had to watch the subtitled stuff. Right. And so like, I think that was also like a really cool thing. So anyway, lots of preamble there about subtitles. All that to say that I hope, people don't let that get in their way, because I think people should check out this movie RRR, which for me was like another one of those things, like you said, watching a film that I certainly was watching this, and there was a lot of cultural context I'm sure went way over my head, like absolutely went over my head. We had a listener who messaged us on Twitter who, because we mentioned last week we were going to be talking about this, and the listener's name, I'm going to look at Hari something, I forget the last name, but the listener Hari was like, hey, like, glad you guys are going to be talking about this, and suggested for us to, if possible, check out this other movie called Bahubali. It's in 2 parts. It's from the same director. And I had a chance to check out the first one. I didn't finish it. It's super long, but I watched most of it, and it was quite good. I certainly was like, yeah, I can see what brought this director to this movie, RRR, which feels like such a culmination of his talents. The director we're talking about is S.S. Rajamouli. He's made a lot of films at this point. I'm seeing I think 12, 13 films in total that he has credited on TMDb. I think that's like a special version of IMDb. Okay. And yeah, I think this director, I'm so fascinated in. And I think if you want to watch Bahubali, by the way, Bahubali and Bahubali 2, it's basically one film in 2 parts, like the listener said. They're both on Netflix. And there are multiple versions on Netflix. I think the correct one to watch is, actually, I'm not going to say because I don't remember. It's in 2 different dubs. And the one that's closest to, I think, the right language, it might be the right one. And I just don't want to speak ill or I speak incorrectly. But I think it's not the Hindi one. But anyway, that said, RRR. I've talked a lot, Will. Why don't you introduce this film and what it's about?
Sure. I mean, not an easy task to be sure, as far as
that's why I'm putting it on you. It's by the way, this movie's in Telugu, language wise.
Oh yeah. But let's see here. So basically, the broad synopsis for RRR is that it follows a parallel narrative between 2 men, one named Ram and another named Bomb. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think it was Beam.
Beam. Oh, sorry, Beam. My bad. And throughout a good chunk of the film, we're kind of just bouncing back and forth between their perspectives, as they come from 2 different worlds. As far as one grew up to be a super soldier, the other had a kind of he grew up with this. We see a sort of tragic backstory as far as his culture. There's this great tragedy that happens, and he feels this need to go into the colonial world in order to bring back a young girl who was kidnapped by the colonists. And in the process
British colonists, we should say.
Sorry,
right?
British
this is the 1920s.
Right. And in the process of saving a bystander's life, sort of indirectly, they both feel this need to save this bystander's life. They realize that they work really well together, but not only do they work really well together, they are secretly not blood brothers, but spiritual brothers who are not only the best bros and the best dudes together ever, but they just have this sort of fate-based kinship to each other, where they realize that I need you and you need me, and it's not really a romantic thing, but it's more just you're my bro and you are the dude who I need to make sure is protected and cared for as much as possible, and the other guy's I was just gonna say the same thing. And it and you just watch these 2 guys just kick Colonius butt for 3 hours, more or less. I mean, that's the broadest definition or the synopsis of the film I can give. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff obviously going in there, but I don't want to give away a lot of the big action beats or a lot of the romantic beats or any of the musical numbers that happen without getting spoilers.
The music number is on YouTube, though, the not to, and I think it's worth checking out. I don't think it gives away. Any plot points that you don't want to be spoiled on, but we are going to do a spoilery thing toward the end. That's why we did everything at the front of the show, because I think that it's hard. I do not want to spoil people on this. I don't want to even talk about specific sequences in this, because for me, the massive enjoyment of this was not watching the trailer, so not really seeing like, what is this movie, right? And being able to see these action beats and see these like spectacular moments happen was like, that was 90% of the fun. So I want to be very, very cautious about it. And I think that's a good way to sort of like get into it. It's like,
absolutely, yeah.
It is essentially, like you said, it's the origin story of Cinemaholics. It's how John and Will, we were just kind of, this person was in trouble, and we were like, all right, well, maybe this guy will help me out, and that's how the show got started. So, anyway, yeah, this is an action movie. It's a blockbuster, and I think that epic is like too small of a word to kind of get across like how. Like, is there a bigger word than epic? Because that's what this movie is. Like, watching this thing, and it's over 3 hours long. I went into it very, very, like, whew, oh, man, 3 hours. Like, I think I said on this show, I was like, Will, come on, man, you're killing me. Like, how am I going to find the time for this?
Yeah, that was the hard sell, I guess, without you knowing anything about the film. And, I mean, like, for a Tollywood film, that's not, irregular, I guess. It's not like this is, like, out of the norm. But, for someone without that experience, like it is like, for a casual it's a type of film that's kind of hard to recommend to, like friends and family, only in a sense that like you have to like trust me that's worth the 3 hours you invest in it. But, certainly the first half of the film has so many action beats where like a normal American film, I guess, like this would probably be like the rising action or like the like climactic beats.
Yeah.
And this is just something that they have happening in like the first 30 minutes of the film to set up the characters.
Right.
And then you get to the actual story of it. And it's just like, it's like just incredible. And then like there gets to be a point where like this one huge confrontation happens shortly after the not to musical number that you were referring to. And it's just like, oh my goodness, like this is like an amazing action sequence. It's just incredibly choreographed. It's just so much happening. It's really fun and funny, and so much happening. And it's just like, oh, that's just like the midpoint. Like we haven't even gotten to the second half of the film yet, and that's just like, oh my goodness, like it's a treasure trove of action goofy goodness that just happens in this movie. And like you said, if you go into not knowing what's going to happen, just being told like, hey, it's a really cool movie, check it out, like it really unravels in so many fun and awesome and surprising ways. Yeah,
because I think especially that runtime is daunting if you're not already a built-in fan of Bollywood and Tollywood, where you're like, oh yeah, I've watched plenty of these movies and I enjoy them quite a bit. No, like I was very much like that is one realm of the film industry that I am woefully inexperienced with. And so there's obviously not frustration, but there's that hesitation, I was like, oh gosh, well, what if it's just not for me and I'm stuck with this movie for 3 hours? But no, I think that this was absolutely one of those cases where it was 100% for me. And I think it was for everybody who was in that screening, because my goodness, like it's such a crowd pleaser of a movie. Yeah. I think because like the story itself is not that complicated, but it has so much going on in it. Like I think that the whole idea of like trying to like liberate, the indigenous people of this area, and, the British Empire, like they're mustache twirling villains. They're very one dimensional, sure. But I think obviously where the film finds its layers and its complications is in the, are these two people going to have to clash? Because, one of them, they're coming from two opposing sides, and, their missions are simple, but like how they have to like do what they do is not simple. And obviously that's all complemented by these like really great touches of just personal and national sort of attention to like what this world, like this 1920s place is. I think it's in India. Delhi, I think, is where it is. And it feels like such a location that like anything can happen. It's not to say that the movie's a fantasy, like it's not that it's, like there are no rules, but kind of there are no rules,
sure. Right? I mean, it is loosely based on true historical events, but Luce is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Like it is a very heightened
Yes.
story, but it doesn't feel like there are stakes. Like that's, I think, crucial to the film, is that like there is a sense that like these characters are infallible, like they're super strong and like there are basically superheroes, but they're not like indestructible. If there were no stakes, then I feel like this would maybe kind of lose its momentum at some point. But the movie is very aware of like the flaws or the failings or the things that hold these characters back. You know, I don't want to say what those are exactly, but I mean, yeah, I think that's like what makes this world feel so exciting, but also never like beyond the realm of like implausible to the point where you just like can't really connect with it emotionally.
Yeah, and similar to Bahubali, the film kind of hooks you in with the action. It hooks you in with the like, oh my gosh, I'm watching, like in Bahubali, I'm watching somebody climb this monstrous waterfall, and it's just like a spectacle to watch. But then it keeps you invested because the danger, of course, is that like, well, you know, how do you keep amping up the action? How do you keep like escalating? That's like a big rule of filmmaking, right? Is you're supposed to like never go down. Like everything has to keep getting more and more ridiculous, more and more action heavy. But I think what this movie does cleverly and rightfully is that by the time you get to that midpoint, by the time you get to that point, where it's like, well, how could you still have another movie's worth of movie left? But I care so much about the characters. I think that they are so intuitive, and I think that they are so lovely, and the stakes of their friendship, right? That's what keeps it going. And then the movie throws like curveball after curveball at you of like, haha, well, do we have another movie's worth? Because there is a movie's worth of story to tell. And I think that that is the case. Like they are not just sort of padding it out. They're not just sort of being like, we're just going to like do this because we have a bunch more action sequences. How many times have we talked about in superhero movies today, particularly Marvel movies, where they all feel built around the action sequences and the story can be so secondary, right? Like they come up, I think the Mission Impossible movies tend to be like this too. It's like they come up with the action set pieces before the story. And I know for me, that's really frustrating because I think story should always trumpet everything. I think like your action set piece is nothing if you don't have a really good story to go with it. You would just have some spectacle that like, you know, I could take or leave. But yeah, that's a big key reason why I think this film is as successful as it is. It's not just the action.
Sure, but I think like the way I kind of jokingly have been referring to this film is that like, as we've mentioned, it is my first Tollywood film. And it's sort of like if you met someone who'd never seen a Hollywood movie and you showed them like Mission Impossible Fallout for the first time. And that was like, or like Mad Max Fury Road or something. And it's just like, this is what movies are. And so, you know, like, and I feel like that's like, just like a kind of casual joke, but it's just like, it's not like the action in this movie is like, it's mostly green screen heavy. I think they shot it during the pandemic. Like, it's not like they're doing things where the actors put their lives on the line or like did anything like incredibly dangerous or like anything you can't believe that they did. So, you know, it's a lot of like heightened, like we said, goofy action, but it is a lot of it like CGI and you know, like it's a lot of green screen effects. But for me, I feel like the best sort of comparison point as far as like a Western perspective, and this is me very much going to be a Westerner in this comparison, is like, this feels like kind of like what the Fast and Furious movies should be. Like, I mean, I like those movies fine and they're enjoyable, but I feel like those movies make such clear strides, certainly from Vin Diesel's perspective of being like, we have the most bonkers, ludicrous action we can, to the point where even Ludacris is in the movie. And ha ha ha. Sure. And we do like these weird things where it's like in the last one, just like people are like, oh, at some point you're just going to take him to space. And it's just like, yeah, sure. Let's just take him to space. And it's just like, they're doing these ludicrous things and they have like this like emotional underpinning where it's just like these very like broad displays of, you know, bromance and like, you know, emotionality in it. And I feel like those movies don't always quite crack the code. Like, I guess the closest is Fast Five, which is a movie I really enjoy. Like, it's a fun action movie, exactly I think what it should be. But I feel like this movie, it has like that core central bromance, the story that really connects you in, and you get all those crazy action beats, but they never sort of like interfere with the other. Like the emotion of the story really resonates and comes alive. And as you're watching this very affecting story, there's just a bunch of cool, crazy shit that's happening with them, or they're just doing a bunch of crazy, cool stuff. And it's just like the balance of that, I think, is what really makes this film so outstanding.
I do want to get into more detail here soon, but I will point out, I think there are only two flaws that are worth even bringing up. Every movie has flaws. What are you going to do? I think one of the flaws is a little bit in some of the construction of the plot. This plot is very much built on conveniences, coincidences. It's not a huge deal. It's not one of those things that breaks the movie like it might in others, because it's something that you might not even notice. And also it's such a heightened movie, as we've said. It does feel like the kind of movie where fate is such a powerful force. Of course, this character is going to show up in this place right at the right time. Stuff like that, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about it. Yeah, it's like, it's almost like predestined that these things are going to happen in a weird way.
Yeah, it's easy to get over that because the mood of the film matches it. The other thing, and this is going to vary for people, right? They're either going to be with it or not, and it is the effects. I think sometimes the effects can be kind of shoddy, and I don't care because, yeah, that's a CGI tiger that looks like a CGI tiger, but let me tell you, I don't care because the construction of the action scene itself is so thrilling that I don't need it to be purely I don't need it to be perfect to be immersed, because the wildness of what's happening is visceral enough that I can still have fist bumping fun. If this was Schindler's List, sure, I'd be a little bit of my suspension of disbelief is in danger. But no, I didn't have that issue with the effects across the board. There were just a few times where I was like, I wish this looked a little bit I wish this was a little bit tighter in terms of the effects, and then this moment would be even good, even better. But then you'll have a moment where two characters are staring each other down and the elements are behind them, and those moments, the effects are almost perfect. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think if you compare the special effects to maybe your typical big budget Hollywood blockbuster, it's going to fall short. But for me, like you said, it never really impacted the film experience or the viewing experience for me, because in a weird way, sort of that cartoonishness that you're referring to adds to sort of heightened buffoonery of the film. It is just one big cartoon in a way. So it makes sense that the special effects aren't super realistic or whatever. And yeah, I mean, maybe that's me making excuses. I don't know, but I do that never fully bothered me. I agree that it is not as good as what you might see from some other blockbusters, but it's not like these effects are worse than some of the effects we've gotten in recent Marvel movies. You know what I mean? Some of those special effects look really bad, and I feel
we still enjoy Black Panther, and that final action set piece is pretty bad in terms of effects.
Yeah, no, I mean two of the most recent Marvel movies got nominated for best visual effects at the Oscars, and Shang-Chi, I'm sorry. No Way Home. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think we agree on that.
Sure. So I don't think that's a completely breaking point of the film, but I can see why it's worth pointing out and criticizing.
Yeah, like I said before, the story is king. You can I have way more wiggle room for special effects if the story is serving the film so well that it makes it easy for me to overlook whatever technical flaws there might be, especially because there aren't really a lot of technical flaws elsewhere in terms of just my goodness, the Natu dance sequence is it's magical. What they're able to do with those, it makes me think man, this is what they're enjoying over in the Bollywood scene, right? Because this is such a staple of we got to have a dance sequence. How come our films don't have dance sequences, Will Ashton? Is it because we can't dance? I think that's it.
Maybe. I don't know.
We had Gene Kelly. What happened?
Sure. I mean,
Hail Caesar did a whole thing with Channing Tatum, and people were like, who cares?
Yeah. No dames. Yeah. So as far as that dance sequence is concerned, I've said this to you before, and I've said it elsewhere, but I just really love, without giving too much away, that there's going to be they're setting it up, obviously they're on a dance floor, what's going to happen, they're going to dance and they're going to school these stuffy British colonialists who think they know everything about everything, but you expect it to be kind of a sort of lighthearted moment, kind of a break in the action, as far as here's sort of a reprieve, and then we're going to get some really cool action again. But that dance scene hits as hard, if not maybe even harder, than most of the action scenes in the film, and I think that was the point for me where I really I was really liking the film before this, don't get me wrong, but I think that was the point where I was okay, I love this movie, this is an incredible film.
I think for me, the second half of this is what made me be like, this isn't just a film that I really enjoyed. This is just something that is hitting on a totally different level than what I was expecting. Because it just sort of takes all this goodwill it's built up, all this enjoyment and amusement, and like this feeling of like, all right, I know what's going to happen. They're a couple buddies, but like, they're going to have some conflict because one wants one thing and the other wants one thing, and then the film completely turns itself on its head, and in such an emotionally fulfilling way. I don't want to say anything else though, because yes, this is. I think we've said a lot of great things about this that I think are true. It's a larger than life film. It's 3 hours, but it's nonstop thrills. I mean, it's just a true spectacle. It's what blockbusters should be. Before we get into more spoilery stuff, we'll definitely play the Rotten Tomatoes game first too.
Okay.
But I do want to ask you, Will. I mean, do you think that this might have an effect on like? I look at this as a movie that like I hope inspires young filmmakers. In the US. I hope that it's one of those films that people check out and be like, you know what? We can make movies that good, like in the US or Canada or wherever, you call home as a filmmaker. I hope it has that effect. I don't know that if it's going to have an effect like in the short term. Like, I don't know if like, Hollywood people are looking at this and being like, okay, we got to step it up. Do you have any sense of that?
I really don't know. I mean, I would hope that's the case. I mean, this movie, I haven't checked the box office recently, but I know at least the weekend I saw it, it was in the top 10, which, I mean, you gotta have to factor in like the pandemic. People are still kind of weary about going to movies and whatnot. But the fact that a major Tollywood movie like this is in the top 10 of the American box office is really, just incredible. Like you said, it's kind of going back to what you're saying, where it's clear that American audiences are, maybe gradually, but still are getting more comfortable going to movies that have subtitles that aren't directly American Western films. And that's what I find really encouraging at this moment. I don't know what the history or like what the legacy, the influence of the movie is going to be. I would hope, it's good. I would hope it makes people realize that like, oh, like I don't have to settle for like so American action movies that are just kind of like not putting in the effort. Like if I would hope it encourages people to be like, we got to step up our game in the same way that like the John Wick movies and a few other recent action movies like Mad Max inspired American filmmakers and other filmmakers be like, okay, we got to clearly step up our game. Like this is in theaters right now. We can't like settle for something subpar. That would be my hope. I don't know what the ultimate legacy or influence the film is, but I mean, even beyond that, I just hope people check the film out and enjoy it. I mean, like I said, like I was, a little hesitant to see it at first, just because, like you said, like it's a 3-hour film. If I don't like it, I feel I'm going to be trapped. Like, am I going to be like getting in way over my head with something? But the response to the film from the word of mouth that was growing was just overwhelmingly positive, point where it's just like not even like one person was just like, yeah, it's pretty good. Like everyone was like, this is really good, or like this is maybe one of the most incredible action films ever made. So I was like, okay, I at least got to give it a shot. Like even if I'm the one outliner, I got to give it a shot. And clearly I'm not the outliner, and neither are you, but I would hope that people, I don't want people feel like the expectations are too high. I don't want to set them up for disappointment, but I imagine most people are going to at least get something out of it, just because the balance, like we said, of the incredible action sequences with the sincere emotional sincerity of the film, and just the way that it's able to infuse these two things together in a really fun, entertaining package is just really, really inspiring and really enjoyable. So yeah, that's my hope and my answer. My long-winded answer to your initial question.
Yeah, I'll say like I want to see the film again, just confirm, cement my opinion. But I think easily this is the best action movie made since Mad Max Fury Road. No question, no contest. Like there's no other action movie I've seen in theaters since then that has come close to this experience. I was giddy watching this movie. I was like just shaking my head, just being like, oh my God, this is something special. And yeah, I think it's one of the best action films probably ever made. And obviously, we'll have time to debate that and discuss that in the years to come, and I hope so. In terms of the box office, as you mentioned, it has made 1,082 crore. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly, but in U.S. terms, it's $140 million, which is fantastic. I mean, the film was made on a budget of 550 crore, so it's more than doubled its budget by now, or it's about to. and that's after just a couple of weeks or 3 weeks at the box office, and it's still picking up steam. I think this movie has a lot of legs because of that word of mouth, and I think that's what's really like just driving it to have such an impact beyond the typical like movie sort of parameters of like, well, it's this kind of movie, which means it's only going to make this amount of, and it's still playing around here in the Bay Area. So not that long, not for much longer. I know I was talking to Adonis, who we mentioned earlier in the show. He was saying like, yeah, it was playing in like the Boston area, but it's already gone. So, yeah, if you want to see this movie, you got to jump on it, I think, at this point, because I don't think it's going to last forever or last that much longer.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're coming into it late, so I apologize if, we set you up to want to see it and it's not playing in your area. But I mean, I would, certainly encourage you to watch it in any way you can. If you can't see it on the biggest screen, you can, even if it's at home. The question I was going to ask you real quick before we get into the Rotten Tomatoes game was, do you think the cast of this film is going to get Hollywood notice if this continues?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No. Because I think maybe in some awards areas, like maybe some awards like groups, I would not say like Golden Globes or Oscars or anything, but maybe some critic circles.
Sure. I mean, there are some English speaking actors who are involved with the film that people may recognize, like Ray Stevenson plays the main villain. People probably know him as like Punisher from Punisher Warzone, stuff like that. But I generally did wonder if like this movie might, allow, and I apologize if I butcher either of their names, but Ram Karahan to, like, because he has that leading man presence. Obviously, I mean, he's the leading man of this film, but like, I don't know if like an American film would want to, capitalize on his like, traditional handsomeness and his just stoicness. And I don't know. I mean, I was wondering that, but that
mustache, I think, is what will probably drive his awards campaign. So we just got to begin now in order to make it happen, I think.
And
that's the thing. Yeah. I think if people are loud and proud about this movie and pushing the conversation all the year long, I think it could happen. And I think it would be wonderful to see. It doesn't have all the usual, indicators. It doesn't have like the things that usually like get it into the politics of awards, which is the only issue. But anything can happen, I think.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, because as much as I enjoyed Ram's performance, I feel like, and again, I apologize if I mispronounced, but N.T. Rama Rao Jr., who played Bahim, his performance, I think, is like the best of the two. I don't know if you agree or not.
See, that's where we flip. I think Ram Charan is the standout, but that's the thing. Well, we were trying to figure out who was who, and I think I was like, oh, is it even a question? And now we've made it even clearer, I suppose.
Oh boy, but I'd be curious to hear why you feel his performance is, because I have my reasoning for why I choose my pick.
I think we're going to talk about it in the spoiler section. I think that's a good way to I think that's a good way to open it, actually. So let's Rotten Tomatoes it up. Only 19 reviews have been counted. That is so sad to see. I'm hoping to get my review up there, though, to add to the fun.
Did Corey's review go up? I talked to him. I guess he's reviewing it for the playlist.
I haven't seen. I think I saw his review on the playlist. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Might even. Yeah, I see it right here in like the like front page of the internet.
Nice.
/ Rotten Tomatoes.
Because I was the one that convinced him to see this film, so I'm glad I'm casually getting the RT score up, I guess, and indirectly at least. Yeah.
Sure. And yeah, so in terms of the film's Rotten Tomato score, though, out of 19 reviews, Will, what do you think the tomato meter, where do you think it's at?
I'm going to say 98.
84%.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll look at that in a second, but first, audience score, what do you think that is? We have 500 plus verified ratings.
Oh, now I feel less confident. 96?
94, pretty close. Okay. So yeah, and I think it's only 3 rotten reviews out of 19. And none of them are from none of them are from sources that I recognize. I think they, from what I can tell, they're not like American outlets.
Oh, okay.
So, I can understand that, certainly if like people who are more familiar with Bollywood and Tollywood might just have, a different impression. So I would understand that.
I was afraid it was like a Cole Smithy thing where somebody was coming out and being just like, I don't get it. Like,
I don't think so. Cause these reviews were pretty early too. These were like March 25th, March 28th. Okay. They weren't like, later in the game of like, all right, I'm going to cut
Fair
this
enough.
movie down to size.
Yeah.
One of them said like it's a bloated affair.
Okay.
Film rings hollow because it never pauses for breath. Obviously, stuff
Okay.
we disagree with completely.
Sure.
Yeah, this person said it throws so much from all directions, and yet I left the theater feeling nothing. That's sad.
I just feel bad for that person, to be honest.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
I mean,
I hope they're okay.
Look, I mean, I don't want to dismiss anyone who has criticisms about the film. Like, so there are criticisms you can make. If you don't like the film, I just feel bad. But I was nervous that like somebody is gonna like start a backlash, being like, "Oh, well, that movie isn't that amazing" or whatever. And it's like, I am surprised. I mean, I haven't seen that backlash. I hope it doesn't come. I mean, I'm already seeing backlash towards like everything, everywhere, all at once, and I mean, yeah. I'm a little nervous, but
we had a fun offline conversation about that. Okay, well, on Letterboxd, universal praise from everybody in my Letterboxd circle who's seen it, like nothing lower than 4 stars. And I'm seeing hearts lighten it up. It's like a Christmas tree on Letterboxd. It's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, Will, what do you think the average rating is though?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we have 7.7 thousand watches, which is quite good for an international film that only just came out. But yeah, what do you think the rating average is?
Is it 4.7?
3.9.
Oh, okay.
You're just in such a good mood, Will, that
Sure.
you're just sort of like, you're having fun. You're just like, everybody loves this. And I'm sorry to say,
Yeah.
I perused the reviews on Letterboxd, and most of them are pretty positive, but they're bunches of 3s and 3.5s.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I haven't seen, at least in my feed, a single person who has been lower than 4 out of 5 stars on this film.
Boy. This review is kind of funny. It's a 1-star.
Oh, boy.
Excessive drama, VFX, and anti-gravity can entertain the mediocre audience who doze off while watching normal cinema. I mean, why would you not know your best friend inside out?
So is that a review of the film or the people who are watching it? I mean, that sounds like a review of the audience. I mean,
I guess so. Boy. Anyway, we're gonna talk about a little bit about the film in a spoilery context before we close things out. I mean, I'll say quick. I mean, next week we're gonna be talking about The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, Northman. Unless we do a bonus for Northman, depending on how things shake out.
yeah, I mean, that's going off of your availability, I guess. I'm not sure.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be a good episode, I think, next week. Lots of fun
Sure.
stuff to talk about. Is there another thing coming out? No, Danny?
The Bad Guys are coming out. You've seen that. I don't know if it's worth discussing.
Bad Guys. Yeah, I just saw that.
Is it worth discussing?
Yeah. Bad Guys, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Is the embargo up for that film? I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it or not.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Did you
it's
like
up,
it?
and I liked it. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Sweet, charming, pretty formulaic, but not in an aggressive way.
Okay.
But okay, spoilers for RRR starting now. Okay. Here's where the movie kind of like won me over completely, because like I had a feeling there was more to Rom, right? And I wasn't sure what they were going to do with him. I was like, okay, are they going to sort of take this character and maybe give him sort of like a tragic backstory that explains why he's a traitor, like why is he working against, or are they going to like try to like do a whole, he's going to go to the good side. And that was kind of like where the movie kind of led me. I don't know how many other people were just like, no, he's secretly good. That caught me off guard, in a good way. I caught that as a surprise, but I kind of get the impression that you saw that coming.
I guess. I mean, I think you're mostly just referring to the sort of flashback sequence that opens the second half of the film, which really, yeah, I mean, I guess you sort of expect a certain thing from a flashback sequence like this. But the way it plays out, I think, like you said, I think that's what makes this film go from like very good to truly exceptional.
Well, no, my question is, did you see that coming? That he was secretly?
Oh yeah, we
good?
can talk about spoilers now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just kind of figured from the opening sequence where he's like kind of beating up everyone, just like there's probably going to be more to this guy than we're led to believe, but I didn't know for sure because it's like, I mean. I figured like if it's true that this guy is really a genuine bad guy and we're starting the film off with this type of scene, like this is a really bold choice for, but it's like, like if it was just a villainous like intro for the film, I think that would have been certainly fine. I mean, it goes as hard as every action beat in this film, to be sure.
I think that speaks to why I love the character so much, because I love to hate the character in the first half because I'm just like, man, he's so cool, but also he's terrible. Like he's doing terrible things, but then he has that friendship, and then that went in a different direction. I thought it would. I thought it was going to be a cat and mouse game.
Sure.
But the movie just kept subverting itself. It's the beauty of not watching trailers. You know, I didn't get that impression that they're best friends, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
and so
yeah, you have that montage where like, it's official. They're tight. They're bros, and they're like riding on the motorcycle and like doing everything together.
Beautiful montage. Oh my god!
Yeah.
Where he's like driving off, and he's like, "Will the blood of the brothers come through?" And I'm just like, I'm gripped. I wasn't eating popcorn, but I was doing the motion of eating popcorn.
Well, yeah, but I know, but then like you see that, it's like, well, I don't think they're going to be singing that if there's not going to be some sort of confrontation between these two later.
Will this end in violence? I think that was the line.
Right.
Bloodshed.
But you watch it and you're like, well, I hope nothing. I mean, it's like hanging out with these, like, it's just, they're so chummy together. Like they compliment each other in every single way. And it's just like, I don't want these two to break up. But when they do actually eventually fight, it's like, I'm torn because I don't want these two guys to fight. Yeah. But I really want to see them fight.
Where they got like really close, they're about to hurt each other. And I was like, no, kiss.
Yeah. No,
but I mean, yeah. There's a lot of homoeroticism that you can read into the movie for sure. Especially at the end. Sure. And I don't know how much of that is intentional, how much of that is cultural, and like it's just different. I don't know. But certainly I was just sort of like, what are these romances they're trying to shoehorn in with this like white woman named Jenny? And
do you think that was like
his fiance? And
you think that was a film trying to be like, we're officially not gay because this woman?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I think so. I think there was a little bit of like no homo going on, which is kind of like, I'm not going to criticize the movie for it. I think that it's just sort of like, another opportunity to be a bit more subversive, to be, everything else about the movie is pretty subversive. So, but sure, not a major complaint.
I mean, I was going to ask you though about the performances from the English speaking cast. Like, I don't think anyone's necessarily bad, but it does seem like these performances aren't quite as strong as
they aren't. But again, I love platonic bromances. Okay, like they don't need to kiss for it to be good. I want to get that out of the way because I can already hear people typing of like, hey, why can't they just be friends? I'm like, yeah, I get it. It's like I get that all the time though. Sure. It's like, I don't know. I'm just asking for some variety, but anyway.
I mean, would I be opposed to the film if they had kissed? Certainly not. I actually just found it really affecting that they're just like really, really good bros. Like it's not like, it's like they don't need to have that extra element of romance in it. They can be platonic and just be really tight and like be like, soulmates in a way without being romantic soulmates. I just thought that was I thought that was really sweet. And it's something I didn't expect at all, certainly.
Exactly. Yeah. And it is in the 1920s. So I'm sure they were just sort of like, well, we got to give them love interests because we don't want them to have like the social angst, whatever. But anyway, agreed about the performances from like the British characters who aren't villains, I think, which I guess there's only one, the Olivia Morris plays Jenny. And at the same time though, like when I rewatched that Natu sequence, I think that it is kind of cartoonish, but I think in a fun way. Like she's just such a like charming and like disarmingly sweet person in this world where everyone around her is oppressive and evil, and she's like the one nice person. And there is this sort of like, what's her deal? Like, why is she so nice? But we never really explore that. I don't think we need to.
Yeah, I mean, you tend to often describe things as like Disney Channel acting or Disney Channel writing, and I kind of got that vibe from her, but in this case, like in a good way. Because like she has
kind of weirdly fits, right?
Yeah, it has like this like she's like so pure, like to the point where it's just like it's almost like sun is radiating from like her face. Like she's so innocent and pure, and and it's just like, yeah, I mean, the role doesn't really demand a whole lot from Olivia Morris other than to be this like sort of ingenue sort of character, and I mean, I guess I think she does what's expected of her. I just feel like I don't know if it's a language barrier. I don't know if it's just because the character is sort of underwritten, but like I just feel like her performance
or the direction,
maybe I don't know, but like
maybe the direction is just like a disconnect between British actors and.
Yeah, but I mean, also
You got to go bigger with it, Olivia. She's like, I'm already going pretty big.
Right, but also like I mean, not to single her out, like the other the sniveling British dude who's like he's also not.
But I think it comes across
amazing.
better as a villainous because you want them to be villainous. Almost with her, it's like a little bit more of like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but I mean, I will say, I mean, I think like Ray Stevenson, like, you know, he's good, like he's, you know, convincing, and he like really
Allison Duty.
He makes the most of every single like line, and also like what's the name of his wife?
Allison Duty.
That's Allison Duty. Yeah, I think she seems to be having a ball with this part too. It's like make him bleed. You know, it's just
I had that moment too. It's like another movie where I was like, I know this person. Same thing with Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I was like, oh, because they played a character in Indiana Jones. Is Allison Duty is I think Elsa in The Last Crusade, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
So big year for Indiana Jones actors. We'll see what Harrison Ford's going to get up to soon.
Sure.
And Shia LaBeouf, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. I one thing I really loved about probably the second half of this movie especially is like as we're getting to know the Rom character more, we're starting to like go into his backstory. We also get like just these sequences that we've stopped getting more of the kinetic over the top like smiling action scenes, and we get the harsher sort of like this is it. Like this is like the stakes have never been higher, and it really works, like especially in like the torture sequence where Beam is getting whipped and it like turns into a song. It's just like it's a beautiful moment. I think like it's like a 10-minute scene or something like that, and it just like the emotion of it all, you know, where Ramen is like trying to not hurt his friend and kill his friend. And it's, you know, the revolutionary aspect of it is really starting to kick in. I was worried, you know, in the early parts of the movie, I was like, well, where's the revolutionary stuff? It's called Rise, Roar, Revolt. There's not a lot of revolting. Especially like in the midpoint, it's just him and the animals. I'm like, well, where are the revolutionaries? I want like a big action set piece, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I do think you point out something that I think is smart, which is that I feel like a lot of action movies, they tend to kind of put the more like over the top stuff towards the end, and they might like over stuff the second half to have like more of the like non-grounded reality things in that point. And I feel like this movie was smarter about like kind of pushing that stuff towards the first half so that the more grounded and gritty action beats hit harder in the second half and they have more depth and emotionality to them. And they see, and certainly the one you're talking about being one of the biggest examples of that. Yeah, and I think it really adds to the emotional core of the film, to be sure.
I think, so we forgot, by the way, to have a little debate. Why would we like one character more than the other?
Sure.
My argument...
I didn't forget. I was waiting.
The reason I like Ron more is because with him, I think that I have more complicated emotions around his character, and I found his journey more compelling. Whereas with Beam, I think he's simpler. He's a simple character. I think he is like sort of the shadow protagonist. You think he's the leading man, not the leading man, I guess, or we know he's the co-lead, but you take the film as a hero versus villain story. But really, I think this movie comes down to like Rom is the real protagonist. It opens with him more than it does with Beam. And I always sort of felt like, you know, this Beam character, he feels a little bit undercut or, you know, underwhelming in some respects. Like he has this connection with nature, which is really fascinating, but there isn't as much of like an arc. I guess his main arc is like, okay, I need to learn how to, I guess, be more trusting or, you know, to sort of like be more patient and to fight in a smart way instead of just trying to like attack everything with violence. I think that that's kind of a half-baked arc though. I don't think it's like carefully built out because I think the movie wants to talk more about Rom and him grappling with like, did I do things the right way? You know, was this like, was harming, you know, my own people for the sake of arming them later, you know, worth the sacrifice? And him coping with that, I think, is a more fascinating element of the story. And I just think the actor himself is just like remarkably good. I mean, just going back and forth between all these different emotional ranges and who he is with one group of people, who he is with another. I just thought it was like a much deeper, richer well. But that's the thing. I don't want these guys to fight. They're both great. So
yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I guess for me, I just found myself more impressed with how Beam was able to, like, at the beginning of the film, he has, like you said, that sort of like primal action scene where you see him shirtless running around in the jungle, just like, being this big badass dude. And you see him later,
Although,
like, he's dressed up like in that colonial
Can
wear.
I say real quick? I want to keep. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I want to say real quick. I don't want to forget this. The genius of that scene is that he's not cool and confident the whole time. There are several moments where he's just like scared.
Sure.
And it's like this. You think he's supposed to be like this calm, cool, collected badass, but that he's just like, oh shoot, like I'm gonna die. But that lends to like liking the character a lot. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. But I mean, I feel like there's never any doubt with him in the opening that like he's like a badass dude, and he's like, gonna, like, he cares about animals. He doesn't want to hurt the animals, but he has to, because it's like he cares about his village, and he wants people. He needs to do what he has to do, and he goes into the colonial India, and he's like kind of dressed up, and he has to kind of be browbeat and like physically beat in a way where it's like, well, can he really sell this? But I feel like he, as a performer, really captures that like kind of like goofy, affable side, and also convincingly sells the action beats that come before and after that. Like he's able to communicate the goofy, silly, like he's able to be, kind of schlubby and goofy and, unbecoming in some ways, but he's also able to be like a total complete badass throughout the film as well. And I feel like he's able to sell the complexity of that part, and physically as well as emotionally, in a way that doesn't feel like one is under service over the other. I think that's what really impressed me about his performance.
I see where you're coming from too. Yeah, obviously they're both impressive performances. Yeah, it's just like I think we just connected with different elements of each a little bit more strongly, I guess. I don't know.
You're a little bit country. Yeah, I'm a little bit rock and roll, I guess. Yeah.
Wait, why do I have to be country?
I don't know. I can change it around.
Especially because this is the character who your character is the one who's out in the country and the jungle.
Sure. I'm a little bit country. You're a little bit rock and roll. Yeah.
I don't know. I still think it's kind of, anyway, I'm more punk. Bratty, I guess. But yeah, no. The only other thing I'll say is, like, we already kind of touched on the romance stuff. I think the romance stuff isn't very strong either. I don't think it needs to be. Like, I think like the whole thing with I think Sati was the name of his like fiance, I guess. Like, I think the movie tries to like also be like a romantic comedy at times, and I think none of that stuff is very interesting. Like, I was always happy to see that like it did always have like a role in the plot. Like the fiance wasn't just the fiance. She also was able to serve exposition. She was able to connect the two characters and be instrumental. And then also, Jenny was also a character who, like, without her, he doesn't, sort of infiltrate, the place. And so they certainly had their functions, but I think the movie was trying to be a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. I think it pulled it off. But it certainly was in the danger zone at certain points.
I guess.
Where I was like, okay. But I think it managed the balance quite nicely. So I that's why I still consider it a remarkable film. Mm-hmm. Definitely one of my favorite films of the year. Sure. I don't know where you land with it.
I mean, overall. It's certainly up there. I mean, I've been championing the film since I've seen it, and certainly I encouraged you and a few other people to see it. I'm glad everyone's responding to it that I've talked to really well. And I hope by talking about it on the show that we've encouraged a few other people to seek it out.
Yeah. So if you are one of those people who did seek it out and now you're listening to the spoiler part, let us know if you have seen it, or if what you thought, especially if you have something to say that we didn't bring up or even touch on, because there's so much I'm sure that like has slipped my mind, or because we didn't get to. It's a big movie,
right? Yeah, I mean, also, like, you saw it like a week ago. I saw it like a couple weeks ago. So I'm sure there's things I've forgotten or overlooked, or I'm taking for granted or whatever. So yeah, I'd love to hear what other people think of it, especially if they see it more recently.
Yeah, can't wait to rewatch it. And again, if you want to check out this director's other work, it certainly is worth seeing. I think it doesn't measure up quite as high as RRR. I think RRR is could very well possibly most likely be his masterpiece at the moment.
Sure.
But certainly Bahubali and Bahubali 2 are absolutely worth checking out. They're quite fun movies. Or the first ones are quite fun. I think I'm like 2/3 of the way through of it. So I'm going to be finishing it shortly, and I think it's quite good. So
yeah, I apologize. I really appreciate the feedback and the recommendation. I just didn't have a chance with work to see the film, unfortunately, but I did want to check it out. I didn't want to make it seem like I ignored the film or didn't check it out. I wanted to see it, just like you said, like the runtime, it just didn't work out, unfortunately. But I am very excited to see not only the director's past work, but what he has in store for the future, because I'm really, really curious to see what's going to come next. Do you think he's going to do RRR 2?
No, I think he's going to do the movie we all want him to do next, Sinister Six.
Sure. You really
Aunt May
really
the
think he's going to
movie.
do Sinister Six? Yeah. I mean, I don't.
I'm just joking around.
Yeah.
I am a little nervous that, he's going to start getting some calls from, people who don't have the best intentions. But I don't know. I feel like this is such a unique director. I highly doubt he's going to be doing like selling out, I guess. But
Sure.
who knows, man?
I mean, yeah. I mean, there is the concern I have that someone's going to be like, hey, Hobbs and Shaw 2. What do you think?
God help us. All right, that'll do it for Cinemaholics this week.
Sure.
Next week on the show, as we already alluded to, we're planning to talk about The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talents. This is like a kind of a Nick Cage meta movie. I don't know too much about it. Well, I don't want to say too much. I haven't seen a lot of. I haven't seen the trailer in full.
Okay.
And I do know that Pedro Pascal is in it, Ike Barinholtz, and Neil Patrick Harris, Tiffany Haddish.
Yeah.
Incredible cast. I don't know what the deal is with Ike Barinholtz and Tiffany Haddish being in a lot of the same projects together.
2 now, I guess, right? They did that.
3, because they were in the After Party. They were in the Oath.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about the After Party. I knew about the Oath, which Ike Barinholtz directed, obviously.
I guess they're buddies. I don't know. But Alessandro Mastronardi is in this as well from Master of None.
Okay.
And
the After Party.
Good cast.
Was that good? The After Party?
I haven't finished it. I only watched the first episode.
Okay.
And I liked it. Yeah. Fun time.
I feel like, and this is not to disparage your viewing habits, but I feel like the Apple stuff, like with the exception of Severance and Ted Lasso, hasn't really like seeped its way into the popular culture at this point. Like people will say, "Oh, that was pretty good," or like, "Oh, I might check that out." And I feel like they haven't really had.
You think so?
I mean, just those 2 shows seem to be the only ones I see people casually talking about outside.
I think that's your timeline, though. I see a lot of like We Crashed. A lot of people were talking about that.
I didn't see anyone talk about that.
Oh, I saw a bunch. Yeah, especially during South by Southwest. But I wouldn't say that. I'd say that it has like certainly. I think I've seen people talking about Pachinko quite a bit. But again, I think we have different timelines. It's hard to know for sure these things. But that said, Severance, that's a show right there. That's like
I like what I've seen so far, to be sure.
I hope you finish it soon because I think we are overdue for a conversation about it. That's for sure. I don't know on here or offline or whatever. But anyway, we'll also talk about hopefully The Bad Guys. I think that's what we're talking about. That's a new DreamWorks animated movie. We're hoping to do The Northman, maybe as a bonus. I think that would be a fun time if we could fit in some time this week and then devote more time to the other movies. The only other thing I've seen on the list is Polar Bear, which is like a Disney nature thing on Disney Plus. That'll probably be the main review. So
okay, good.
Yeah, so fire up your Disney Plus. And that's it for us though this week. Thank you so much for listening to Cinemaholics and supporting us all the way. Don't forget we have Patreon, we have a merch page if you'd like to support us. All that info and more is in the show notes, including our social media. We love you guys. We'll see you on the next one from the Internet California. I'm John Negroni.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.